this is Pastor Jeff Lehn, and I'm with Mary Watt and Bill Bishop. We're all on the Racial Justice Task Force, which was put together several months ago in response to George Floyd's death and the need to have a racial justice reckoning in our country as well as in our congregation. And so we've been meeting the last several months, working on primarily three areas, the areas of education and advocacy and relationship building. And one of the fruits of the task force right now is that we're holding a class with Reverend Andrew Packman called Coming to Terms with Race. And he's helping us see the idea of race, the institution of race, the sin of racism, and most recently in last Thursday's class, the particular history of the United States when it comes to racism. And so we just wanted to take a moment and hear from Mary and Bill and what they've learned from the class, how they've been inspired by it, and really to invite all of you to attend. So Mary and Bill, just tell us, what is one thing or two things that have surprised you so far in the two sessions you've attended from Andrew's class about the history of race?
Well, I think Andrew in the first session presented a lot of statistics that focused on the disparity between the lives of Black and white Americans, some of which I really wasn't aware of. One of the most striking is the fact that the wealth of an average Black family in America today is 1/10 of that of the average white family, which I found really shocking, and of course goes back, hundreds of years and really relates to home ownership and the rules and regulations that were in place to control that over the years. Another thing that surprised me was the difference in life expectancy between Black and white Americans, depending on where you live. If you live off Michigan Avenue in Streeterville, you are probably going to live to be 90 years old. But if you live in Edgewater or some of the other west and southern parts of Chicago, that are low income and marginalized in many ways, your life expectancy might only be 60. So both those things are really striking, I think, in addition to all the other things that we know about medical care and employment and schools. But those two things I thought were things I really didn't know about.
Thank you, Mary. Bill?
Well, I was surprised by kind of the definition or the dimensions of the definition of race. And interestingly, I learned to my surprise that race, as we understand it, is a relatively new idea in human history. People in ancient times tended to focus on where you were from. You were a Greek, or you were in the Middle East, you were from a different town or even country. But the idea of the color of your skin really did not enter into someone's impression of you or assessment of you. So that I found that a little bit surprising. Another thing that I think is interesting and important is that really it was the Western Europeans who started to use race as a reason for classifying dark people or Black people as something different. And not only different, but inferior, because that helped the rationale for subjugating them in one way or another, and then eventually enslaving them. So it became a handy tool where you could still feel good about yourself and make a lot of money on the backs of these people. So I wasn't aware that it was that recent in human history that this was put together. The institution of racism was put together.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Mary. And then tell me just one more thing. How has this class so far, personally impacted you as you think about your own life, your own Christian faith, and how you feel called to engage in the work of racial justice?
Well, I think over the last few months of being involved in this task force, I have spent a lot of time thinking about the inherent privilege that I have really enjoyed my whole life, and certainly enjoy today as a white woman living on the very affluent North Shore of Chicago. Um, it has certainly brought a new awareness to many things that I've taken for granted in the past, and made me not only aware, but look for ways in which to address those inequities um, that exist. Not an easy task, but something that I think the first step is acknowledging and recognizing that my life has been very easy. I mean, lots of doors have been opened to me just because I'm a white woman. The doors that if I were Black and living under very different circumstances would be closed. So that certainly has had a profound impact on me personally.
Thank you, Mary.
I agree with Mary. You probably don't understand white privilege until you start thinking about it. And frankly, it was one of my daughters who brought this idea of white privilege to me, and I at first tried to say, well, wait a minute, if not all white people are privileged. Sure, some are, but others. And then as we developed the conversation and we got more into the idea of systemic racism, I began to see, what she was talking about. I think I'd been asleep maybe for a decade or two, thinking that, we were progressing. I was there. I grew up in the civil rights era and voting rights, and it seemed like we had made tremendous progress. And the idea of systemic racism, at first, I was put off by it, or white privilege, all those terms, until I started really getting involved again, thinking about racial justice, which brought me to this task force. But if you think about it, it's true. And you don't, as Mary said, you take it for granted. Live in a nice place. And the impact that this system has had on so many people is, it's horrendous. And we need to start making this right. I don't have all the answers. I don't think the task force does, but we've certainly got to start with, awareness and education and trying to reach out.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Bill, for your vulnerable sharing of what you've been learning so far in Andrew's class, as well as your steady and courageous work on the Racial Justice Task Force. Just a reminder, friends, that Andrew's class meets again this Thursday on November 5th, and then a final session on November 12th. They're both Thursday nights, 7:30 to 8:45. The Zoom links are in the church emails. Email me if you have any questions about how to access it. But we're grateful for this small step in a long, long journey of being advocates for our Black and brown sisters and brothers, and trying to bring about the flourishing of all, which is God's dream, God's kingdom in the here and now. So grace and peace to you, friends, and thanks again, Bill and Mary.